My name is Penny Gamble Williams, and I am the spiritual leader elder of the Chappaquiddick tribe of the Wampanoag Nation. Our land is on Chappaquiddick Island. I am a mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, and the story that I'm going to tell you, I guess, goes back many moons. I was in the 5th grade, and it had an amazing summer. I was on New Bedford with family. We went to Mashpee. We went to Martha's Vineyard. And then by the end of the summer, we were down at Narragansett for the August meeting. So the first day back to school, the teacher asked everybody to write something about their summer. So of course I wrote about all the things that had happened that particular summer. I stood up and I read my story. And when I finished and I sat down, the teacher came over to me. She firmly put her hand on my shoulder and said, "It's not nice to make up stories like this. You know, all the New England Indians are dead." So that had quite a, an effect basically on me. And I sat back in my chair and everybody looked at me and, as if I had made up this story. I'm sharing this because that was a long time ago, but we're still dealing with things like that today in 2021. So it's really important to pay attention to what it is we're dealing with and why it's important to get rid of racist symbols, mascots in the school system. It's humiliating, it's denigrating, it marginalizes Native youth, and it has an effect on non-Native youth. And I say that because of sometimes in the educational system, the history is not told. So therefore, people don't understand, they don't know about the surrounding tribal nations within the Commonwealth. And that's a problem, that's an issue. It cannot be ignored anymore. This is happening, of course, nationwide. It's happened with major sports franchises on a national level. And now it's really important to do something about it within the Massachusetts school system. So removing the racist mascots and changing the names really is a bold step. The question is not always simple to answer because sometimes people will say, well, what's wrong with the mascot? We're honoring Native people. It is not an honor. It's an insult. So the original people of this continent and the people of Massachusetts, the original people, have a story. There's a history, and it continues. A lot of people don't even know about the original people who are within the districts of the schools where they attend. You might have streets, ponds, rivers named after the areas, and people don't even know what that means. I'm saying how important it is to learn about all of the tribal nations within Massachusetts. We just had the 400th year in 2020, 1620, 2020. There are so many opportunities for people to learn and to understand and to sensitize so we all realize how important it is to get rid of mascots that don't honor, that cause emotional issues with young people. So it is important to make the change, to stand up for something that is really important. And with that, I want to say, Katapatash, thank you for letting me share my story.
Very grateful to you for that. I'll turn it now to Melissa. Penny, thank you. It's always an honor to listen to my fellow Indigenous folks speak. Um, Waniki Sak, Natasuis, Melissa Ferretti, Nu Tomas, Sikwana Makwapakwit, Kanatai Patuxit. What I've said to you in my traditional language is good day, hi. My name is Melissa Ferretti, and I am from the Herring Pond tribe of Plymouth in Borndale. So as Penny, you know, I'm a mother and a grandmother. I was raised in Cedarville, a small village in Plymouth, by my father's aunt, Verna Harding. Verna was an elder of the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe, born in 1905. And she was one of the strongest women I ever met, known to outwork two men in her lifetime. And Verna, we grew up very traditional when it came to food and eating, and relied on the land for our sustenance for the majority of our meals. I was just previously on a meeting earlier with Senator Moore, and we laughed a little about how I probably grew up eating more rabbit and venison than I did chicken and beef until I was old enough to realize the difference. So raised in Plymouth, I was born with a birth certificate that identifies me, shockingly enough, as red, color or race red. I'm always committed to my speech, but I just wanted to divert from it just a little bit this afternoon and just share a little bit about not only being born and raised red in the town of Plymouth. We did not have an Indian or a Native mascot, but we did have the Mayflower as our big our sort of mascot to look at growing up. So I think for myself, it was difficult sometimes because racism comes from many different places. You know, my birth certificate says I'm red. My father's aunt Verna was dark skinned. My sister Brenda was dark skinned, yet I was raised with light skin. So it was confusing being a child. I think I held a lot of very subconscious about my looks, because you think and you look at things like these mascots, and they always have these big giant faces and big noses. And as a young child, I think that really weighed on me. And I think it had a lot to do with how I felt about myself, looking at these images and these characters, thinking, do I look like that? You know, always afraid to not have a profile because of these things. So I just wanted to share that before I do go into my speech, because I think it's important to think about how these images and how young children and youth might think and how they feel when they see those types of images. So in my tenure as tribal chairwoman, I have really worked tirelessly to educate the public about non-natives and natives about the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe. We've been here in the town of Plymouth, Borndale, and the Commonwealth, and we are what we're called a state status tribe. Our own Commonwealth doesn't recognize us and cannot say that we're state recognized. So we're not even recognized in our own state, first of all. So as a tribe at the ground zero of colonization, we know very well that there is little knowledge of the contemporary knowledge of the Native people here. We're often overlooked, we're ignored, and we constantly have to validate our existence, explain who we are, where we're from, something that could easily have been explained if in a classroom, if only Native American education was part of the curriculum. As a tribe whose ancestral homelands, along with the forests, fish, and other wildlife in the region, was used by the Pilgrims to serve their interests as colonists, we know well that our history as as a tribe are directly connected to the ongoing struggles that other Native communities in North America face. There is a long history of erasing, ignoring, and trying to silence Native people in the United States. This is part of the racism faced by tribal nations and citizens in New England. The racism that says we don't exist and that we should have no voice in matters that directly affect our lives or in our rights, like mascots. Native people throughout the United States have fought for decades to bring an end to Indian mascots. First and foremost, such symbols and imagery are deeply offensive and racist, as Penny had just stated so graciously. They're harmful to the well-being of Indigenous people, and especially our Native youth, including myself as a small child. There are no sports team mascots that do honor to tribal identity and our history, or that of any other tribal identities and histories. Mascots do not make Euro-American sports fans want to go to the library and read the work of brilliant Native authors, or to learn about Native history and the theft of Native homelands, or the enslavement of Native people in colonial New England, or learn about the racism and genocidal impacts of US Indian policy. They've done none of those. And promoting the notion that it's okay and it's just harmless fun to reduce Indigenous people to stereotyped images and characters is simply ridiculous. These images of Indianness have been part of the Euro-American mindset for over 500 years, and its justification of violence and racism directed specifically at Indigenous people. Sports team mascots are part of the colonial project of erasing Native identities, silencing Native accounts of their own history, and they suggest that colonization of Native people in the region was inevitable and necessary. But we have never been silent. This group here, I feel like these panelists that I'm here with today, they feel like family to me, because we've started this and we've been on this mission for many, many months now, over and over again, sharing the same stories. They may be redundant, but they're important. And we know well that there is little knowledge, as I said, of the contemporary existence of tribal communities in the region. I know I faced it, my family has faced it. And I'm light-skinned and I faced it. So racism comes in many different forms, and it can mean a lot of different things. But we're here today working to educate Euro-Americans and government officials about the blatant and destructive racism of such images as sports team mascots. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa, so much. I'm going to turn it over now to Elizabeth. Welcome.
Hi there. Thank you. Hi there. My name is Elizabeth Solomon. I'm a member of the Massachusetts tribe at Ponkapog. And I work at an academic institution, so I'm going to take a little bit of a different kind of take at this and really kind of do a little bit of an examination of actually what a mascot is. So according to Merriam-Webster, a mascot is a person, animal, or object adopted by a group as a symbolic figure, especially to bring them luck. Synonyms are amulet, charm, fetish, mojo, talisman. The purpose of a mascot is to bring good luck and victory for a team. The most commonly used mascots are predatory or dangerous animals, such as lions, tigers, scorpions, eagles. Other mascots that are commonly in use are people from the past, such as Vikings, Spartans, pirates, or pharaohs. Sometimes they're imaginary or mythical creatures like trolls, dragons, orcs. Very, very infrequently are contemporary people or groups used as mascots. And usually when that does happen, the group that's represented is usually representative of the people in the organization itself. So for example, Americans or Yankees. It is inconceivable that a mascot would be a contemporary ethnic group. I think Native Americans are the only ethnic group or race that could conceivably be used as a mascot. So what does this say about using Native Americans as a mascot? Does it mean we're like animals? Does it mean that we are no longer contemporary, that we are people of the past? Does it mean we're imaginary or mythical creatures? What the point I'm trying to make is that by using us as mascots, you're placing us in the same category as other mascots, the commonly used mascots, to which we do not belong. It dehumanizes, inhumanizes us in ways that many of my fellow panelists will be talking about later. And one of the things that I want to pick up on in terms of something that Melissa said is the idea that we have been silenced for centuries. And one of the most prominent things about a mascot is they do not speak. Someone else speaks for them. And I would like you to think about, as you listen to all of the other people who are talking today, and when they give their personal stories, think about how that fits in to what it means to be a mascot. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Grateful for your words. I'm going to turn it now to Brittany.
Cha, Natasawas, Brittany, Pi Winnipeg, Wally. Hi, my name is Brittany Littleleaf Wally. I'm in Medway, so the Norfolk County. And I want to start just by saying, Katabaramish, I do thank you. I thank everyone joining us today. And it's important to show gratitude to people who want to listen and focus in on this bill, this mascot bill. I do feel like the folks I speak with are like a small family, but it doesn't go over my head that many of the people that I work with have been doing this work for the better half of my adult life, if not longer, not to age anyone. It's a privilege to do this work, but it is also an honor and obligation. So I do have some personal anecdotes to share, but mostly today I will be focusing on the most salient points as to why this is not a local issue. It is important to understand that an issue like this needs to be dealt with on a state level rather than leaving it up to the towns. So here are some reasons why. The first is that mascots leave their towns when people travel through media coverage, but they also just travel if they're on memorabilia as well. So an ally in Hanover voiced that he couldn't wear his high school memorabilia because he knew that the images on it were wrong at the time. Not to forget that our friend, our co-representative, Shauna Newcomb, who is not able to meet with us today, she represents the Mashpee Wampanoag and she works in that school system. So how do you think that makes her feel? At least before they were on their road to change. When mascots travel to my town, I don't find it very fun. My town's rival is Millis, and they have a native mascot, and they have a long-standing, football rivalry with my town. So even though my town doesn't have a native mascot, I've seen that my entire life. A second reason is that many towns are unwilling to eliminate native mascots. So I'd like to bring the case of Agawam up, because when the change came into their community as an idea, many people in the town doubled down on their mascot, starting to do fundraisers to put the image in their driveway or in their home windows as little sticky Klingons. There's a lot of different things that towns do to really double down on keeping their mascot. In Millis, I know that there are educators who believe that they insist that they know enough about the specific Indigenous group that they're using as a mascot, that they think it justifies the continuation of their mascot. That's not okay. A third reason is that school committee members sometimes lose their seats in the next election based solely on their vote to eliminate mascots. This is incredibly unfair, and I think no matter what you know about a school board, you shouldn't lose your seat over one thing, especially something when you're fighting for what's right. In Turner's Falls, 2 committee members lost their seats. This is incredibly unfair. And this also lends to a following point, because I also have other allies in Killingly, where some people actually ran on the platform alone of keeping their native mascot. And that happened to my allies who are also on the school board. That's incredibly unfair to them and their community. A fourth point is that students and school administrators who support the elimination of native mascots often face bullying and harassment. And this is what I mean when I said that the point that I just said is related to this one, because also in Killingly, people on the school board that were fighting for a positive change had to be escorted to their cars daily by the school police officer to ensure their safety. So that means that some school board members ran solely on the platform of bringing the native mascot back, while other school board members were being assisted by the police officer to ensure their safety. I think we can all tell that that's incredibly inequitable. The fifth point is that local struggles over native mascots generate a hostile climate for native people who live in the region. And there's often an undue burden on native people to travel out to speak on mascots in these different locations. And so we have to remember that before we were able to just meet in the comfort of our own homes, this requires native people like myself and like a lot of people here on this board who have much more experience traveling out to go into these towns that express an obvious hostile climate for us, our stories, both contemporary and historic. It's not okay. And it's also something that we can see today. We're all taking time out to meet here. But like Melissa said, we do talks like this all the time for different school boards. It's very time consuming and no one's getting paid for this. It's all volunteer. And also people who live in the region who might have a voice and might want to stand up for the change sometimes don't, because they live in that town and they want to keep their family safe. And I respect that. So I hope that by the end of our time together today, we're all clear on the harm that native mascots bring. And I hope that we all remember that this bill creates a wonderful opportunity for folks to step on the right side of history. In other words, this bill creates a chance for people to walk forward together in a positive way. Kadabadamish, thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. Appreciate that so much. Over to Fairies now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Farius Gray. I am the Sagamore of the Massachusetts tribe at Ponkapog, and I'm also a tribal historian. Coming to you from Bridgewater today, which is the birth or the home village of one of our leaders in the past, Wampatuck, who was the son of Chickasaw. So I'd like to put all of this mascot issue into some context. For those that don't know the history, the colonial history of the Commonwealth. The indigenous people here were trading with Europeans, English, French, Dutch, for a long time before they settled here, close to 100 years. But right before settlements arrived, 2 waves of plagues hit all of the indigenous in the Northeast, in the region. 2 waves. By the end of these waves of plagues, 90% of all of our population was dead, gone. And we can sort of kind of relate with COVID, how that must have felt within the last year, how it impacted all of our lives. But 90% of our population wasn't dead. And so when the first settlers arrived, many of our people were already gone. Deals were made for protection, but thousands and thousands of new settlers came every year. We were cut off from the ocean, which was our primary food source. We were herded or collected or isolated into praying towns, Ponkapog being one of them. And during our isolation in these praying towns, we were converted to Christianity, forbidden to practice any of our beliefs, forbidden to dress in our traditional clothing, forbidden to go beyond the borders of these praying towns, forbidden to practice our spirituality. Our men were taken out of these villages or praying towns, placed on the islands. So our women and children left unprotected. And all this was calculated by the colonists so they can take and take and take. So if you fast forward to here and now, where in the past, it wasn't good to be an Indian. You were a savage. You were less than human. And now you have mascots in the schools. Indigenous people are the mascots now. And now we're told that this is for honor, honoring the indigenous people with mascots. That's not how the indigenous see it. We see it as we're invaded, killed, murdered. Genocide is the correct term. And in recent history, another people had genocide committed against them, and those were the Jewish people. They're not anyone's mascots. That's unacceptable, but it's acceptable for us to be the mascots. And so we see it as our colonizers now has us as their trophy on their wall. We conquered the savage. We conquered the Indian. We conquered the warrior. We conquered the red man. We have to tell you how harmful this is, that perhaps you just don't understand what it is to be human, because we are human beings. We feel as you feel. We love our families. We want the best for everyone. And so myself and all the panelists here have been working tirelessly, going from community to community. Some communities are open to the change, others hostile threats given. But we do it because it's the right thing to do. And as tribal representatives, it's our responsibility to do that for all of our people. And so we do it. And we have to tell the same stories of it's harmful to our children, to your children. And all this is so apparently clear. And it's really unfair to ask these communities to change it because they're biased. They don't see it. They don't see the harm. There is harm. We're all here to say there's harm. And we are all the descendants of the people that were here first, that the founding fathers of this Commonwealth of the Bay Colony all met with. We are all of their descendants. And we're telling you it's harmful to all of us. But we need your help to change it, because some communities will not change it because they just don't care. And we need your help. So we're asking you for your help, asking you to do the right thing. We're not asking you to move mountains. We're asking you just to sign into law that it's forbidden. I mean, it's racism. It is absolutely racism. The Massachusetts, we were not a warrior class society. But a lot of these schools think we were because their mascots say warriors. We're primarily farmers and fishermen. And if we were not primarily farmers and fishermen, none of the colonies would have survived. If we were a warrior class society, we would have killed the colonists first contact. We were not. We were farmers and fishermen. You don't see any mascots saying the farmers or the fishermen. You don't see that. And so they don't even know who we were. But we can good enough to be their mascots, and they're showing us honor. It's not showing us honor. It's very harmful to us. So what we ask of all of you is just to do the right thing. Let's get rid of the mascots. It's not 400 years ago. It's not 300 years ago. We can't change those things. We can't change the future. And so we ask you for the help to change the future. We don't want to go to town to talk about a negative thing like the mascots. We'd rather go town to town and build relationships with them, create a partnership with them. That's what all of us would rather focus on. But we need your help. So I thank all of you for your time today to listen to all of us. I'd like to thank my fellow panelists as well. And I wish you all a good day and be safe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for pointing us to the future. Over to Jamie, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Typically when I come on, I kind of talk about my experience as a student athlete at Winchester High. I'll talk about my years coaching at Haskell University, which is the only all-native 4-year university in the country. And then as a head men's basketball coach the last 10 years at MCLA and now coaching at UMass Boston. And I talk about at Winchester how when I was a student, we had pep rallies where the squaw was in a cage, and squaw is not a very nice term to begin with. And, someone had to come out and save her, and how students and staff are often dressed up as Indians and running up and down the sideline, war whooping and doing whatever they stereotypically thought Native folks do. And even now as a recruiter at UMass Boston, if I go to a state tournament game, you'll see if there's one school that has a Native mascot, at some point the tomahawk chop's going to break out, and it's a hostile environment. And I have 2 boys, and so when I moved back to Eastern Mass, I immediately eliminated any community that had a Native mascot, including where I went to high school, which has now changed in large part to the work of my fellow panelists there. But even now, every weekend, my boys play hockey, and every other weekend, they're playing somebody who has an Indian logo on their jersey. It could be Dorchester, it could be Braintree, it could be Pembroke. And so that goes on. And I could tell story after story about that. But, something caught my eye last week, and Barry's kind of just referenced it. And I think most folks are probably aware of what happened in Duxbury I think last week or the week before at the football game, where some poor judgment was used, and the teams were using terms that were derogatory related to Jewish culture and the Holocaust, and we're really just completely out of line. And locally, the initial reaction was going to be, we're going to suspend the coach for one game, and maybe there'll be some other kind of minor things, but that was going to be the discipline. And this sort of highlights why this needs to be at the state level. And I believe Senator Feingold got involved. I believe it was reported that he's of Jewish descent, and it was something that hit home with him. And I'm sure there were other, people in the Jewish community that also got involved, and it became sort of a state issue. The state senators got involved, other people got involved, and within a week, the coach was fired, which was the right thing to do, right? I mean, that's you can't be doing something like that. It sends a terrible message. It's ignorant. You're teaching young people really the wrong thing. But at the local level, people are just too close. They don't always see straight. There's a lot of maybe local pressure, and they're not capable of doing this. Now, if this happened in a week and the coach was fired, the games were canceled, and now there's more education. I think Senator Feingold had met with either players and stuff recently. At least that's what was reported. 1 week, it's been rectified. We have still over 30, 35 mascots. If this was an Indigenous thing, if it would have happened, it would not have been the same result. And so the point of fair is, this needs to be done at the state level. It needs to be corrected. There was something happened in a week, it was fixed. And now we're still, going from town to town and city to city, doing these presentations and doing these panels, and we're happy to do it. But like Ferry said, we'd rather be going and building relationships and talking about education and talking about curriculum. And so, I think the other point that I'd like to make too, and then that'll be it, is that you talk about, I'm from, right, my people are from the South and from the Plains. I'm not from here, but the colonization that took place in New England and Massachusetts, the Native folks here were the first contact. They took the brunt. If you go west of the Mississippi, you will see representation at the local government, at the Senate level, at the state level. New Mexico, Deb Haaland, Sharice Davids, Alaska. So there is some representation politically that sort of helps protect the indigenous populations of those areas when things pop up. Is it perfect? No, but we don't have, the indigenous population is so small here that we maybe will be lucky to have someone at a local councilman or a school committee, but we don't have that. So we rely on our House representatives, on our state senators to do the right thing. This is easy. It's an easy fix. It's the 21st century. It shouldn't even be a debate. And it's taken a long, long time for us to even get to this point, to have a chance to meet with all of you. And we share so many common backgrounds, of genocide, of colonization, of slavery, right, of assimilation. There's probably a lot of you on here, if you have ancestors that grew up down south or from the Caribbean, you would probably have, some indigenous blood, because folks stuck together back then for survival, right? And so it may be a stronger connection and issue for you than you think, but we need your help, and we need you to be able to relate to it. And I think it doesn't have to be the most important thing to you, but it needs to be important, and it's something that we feel is pretty easy, and is well and long overdue. I thank you for your time, and hope that we're able to work together to continue to do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Over to you, Rhonda.
Hi, I might be able to walk, talk, and chew gum, but my internet cannot. So I need to turn off my video while I'm speaking. So I just wanted to say hello in person, and off I go. So pagalagisi uvalami pangmapak ano oranga koinami Tanakshinaga Rhonda Anderson, Shabaktunga Western Massachusetts Commissioner on Indian Affairs and founder and co-director of Ogateo Cultural Center. Thank you for listening. So my name is Rhonda Anderson. I am a Nupak Athabaskan, and I am speaking from Sakoki, Abenaki, and Pecumtuck traditional homelands in Corrine, Massachusetts. I am a Nupak Athabaskan, and I have lived here in Western Mass for most of my life. And I am also an alumna and mother of a child in a district with a Native team mascot. My child does not go to that high school in this district because I do not want her to have the same issues that I did growing up with a Native mascot. So instead, I've proudly cheered on my daughter and our friends as aardvarks and otters because we're going to be proud of our kids no matter what, right? So I'm extremely grateful that there is recognition in our state Senate and House that our state flag and seal needed to be addressed by a special commission. And I have hopes that everyone understands that this long overdue work in reparations must continue. For if a state can no longer use a racist flag and seal, neither should our educational institutions. I have hopes that everyone understands that oppressions and marginalizations of any racial group are never acceptable. And we cannot overlook this racism in our children's educational system via mascots. And as Elizabeth had said, Native Americans are the last accepted vestige of overt racism in this country. And I would even say celebrated racism. So mascots, they are stereotypical representations that erase the identity of Native people, generate stereotypes about what a Native person looks like, as Elizabeth was saying, portrays us as people in the past, and such representation in educational settings leads to more widespread and acceptable stereotyping and biases. The use of these mascots in educational settings greenlights a more widespread community stereotyping, making it acceptable. And most portrayals of Native mascots, like Farias said, are warlike, aggressive, and violent. And it's evidenced in our local newspaper because the headlines read, "Indians invade and town braces for attack." And of course, as Jamie said, outright cultural appropriation by wearing stereotypical headdresses to the games. These stereotypes and violent portrayals create biases that dramatically affect our outcomes. We have the highest rates of our women being murdered, sexual assault, teen suicide, incarceration, and death from police brutality. So it can be hard to visualize a future with yourself in it when facing such erasure and violence. This is not honoring. Decades of empirical evidence show these representations lead to Native students struggling with positive identity, and through the use of mascots, non-Native students are left with these stereotypes about who we are, right? So this stereotyping makes Native students feel unsafe and unwelcome. This is a civil rights violation. This is not honoring. Educating the general public on this issue is time consuming and it divides communities. As a Native woman, I have found it is dangerous to be speaking up for change, as other Native activists and I have been subject to verbal harassment, rape threats, and death threats. These harassments even happened from students in schools. They called me the B word on a Zoom call. So these harassments and dangers are real, and they're continuing even during the age of Zoom meetings. This is not honoring. So given the continuously intense burden and danger that's placed on the shoulders of an oppressed minority to attempt to make these systemic changes locally, and I have to say we are volunteers doing this, legislators must make changes on a state level rather than a town by town basis. Now, we've been working hard. I am proud to be part of this panel are amazing people. We have worked to make changes in roughly 13 school communities since May of 2020. And most of these communities present hostile situations for us as Native people. This is not honoring. So please listen to the statement supporting this bill from the 5 Massachusetts tribes and the National Congress of American Indians, which has been fighting mascots for 52 years. That is what honor looks like. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rhonda. I very much appreciate your words. Over to Cedric to close us out of this formal part of the presentations.
Thank you very much, Senator Comerford, and to my dear colleagues on the panel and the rest of you here. Like Rhonda, like Jamie, I am a guest in the territory of Indigenous peoples from what we today call the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. My home in Mattapan is in traditional Massachusetts territory, but I also have worked very closely with the Nipmuc Nation in various bands of Wampanoag peoples here and consider myself richer for that. We don't have to guess about the impacts and effects of Native mascots. My dear colleagues, professors Laurel Davis Delano, Joseph Gaume, Stephanie Freiberg, have published research looking at comprehensive reviews of empirical data, not opinion, data, as to what mascots do. And I would posit to you that decisions made in Massachusetts public schools should be based on research findings rather than opinions. The direct effects on Native persons, Native youth in particular, are that they generate a hostile climate for Native students in our schools, paid for by public tax dollars. For these Native youth, it leads to lowered self-esteem, less capacity to imagine future accomplishments for oneself, less belief that one's Native community or tribe can make a difference, increased negative feelings, including stress, distress, depression, dysphoria, and hostility. And in one study, as Jamie pointed out, anecdotally to support the research, a tendency to avoid athletic events at a school with a Native mascot. Indirect effects on non-Native persons, non-Native students, can absolutely still negatively impact Native Americans. Schools that have Native mascots lead to an association with negative thoughts and stereotypes about Native peoples. Exposure to Native mascots increases negative stereotyping of Native American individuals. Those who support Native mascots are more apt to hold stereotypical and prejudicial attitudes about Native Americans. And 2 studies suggest Native mascots increase active discrimination towards Native peoples. These findings demonstrate that Native mascots are harmful to non-Native youth as they reinforce stereotypes rather than accurate information about Native American people. And I'm sure my dear colleague Laurel will be happy to provide you with a comprehensive bibliography as to what these studies, this research actually says. Thank you very much.